Hello, everybody. It's fantastic to see you. My name's Jeremy Siskind. I'm coming to you live from Long Beach, California. No, it's not live. I'm the author of Jazz Piano Fundamentals, Book 1, Book 3, Book 2, as well as playing solo jazz piano. And I had a student come to me this weekend. Shout out to Josh if you're out there. His complaint was that he finds his comping to be boring. He knows his voicing, like he's got good type A, type B stock voicings, but was just kind of feeling like when he's comping, it's just kind of playing those voicings again and again, which I think is a common complaint. And so we had a nice lesson, and I wanted to share some of the things that we talked about, because I'm sure that many of you will be in the same boat. So let's start with a friendly C major 7. And so he was sharing with me, and this is exactly what I teach in my Jazz Piano Fundamentals book, that probably most likely, if he's playing a C major 7, he's going to play a voicing somewhat like this: 3rd, 7th, 9th, 5th, and maybe you can add something, on top, but that's where he's going to mainly hang out. And the point is, even if you're able to move these notes around a little bit, add something on top or on bottom, you're still just kind of stuck in one place. So the first thing that I was thinking about that we worked on was taking this set of 4 notes and then inverting it. And it doesn't have to be hard. Basically, I'm thinking about this as a 4-note scale, and each note is going to go up the scale. So the scale is E, G, B, and D. You can think of it as the notes of an E minor 7 chord. Oops. And so E is going to go to G, B, and then D as you invert it. Another word that might actually make sense is arpeggiating this voicing. So each note is going to go up to the next note in this series. I'm making this sound more complicated than it is. So that you always have all 4 of the notes Okay, so I like this because you're using the information that you have. He's got a really good voicing, and now we're starting to move it around. And so what do you do with this? Now you've got these 4 positions. Well, what I would do is I would come up with really short melodies. I would start probably with just 2 notes and build up from there. For now, we're going to have these melodies only use the 4 notes that are on top of these voicing, or the 4 notes of these voicing. So again, E, G, B, and D. So for instance, I'm using the term melody really liberally here. Maybe the melody is, and then I'm going to practice harmonizing with those voicings that I came up with. So I'm going to use the one starting on D and then the one starting on B. So if I draw that underneath, it would look something like this. And this seems very simple. It's not that complicated, but I want to draw your attention to 2 things. And I'm going to zoom in the middle of my keyboard. So the first one is that I'm making a grace note on the bottom of this chord to give it a little bit of personality. It sounds okay without the grace note. I'm not going to get fired from my gig without the grace note. But it's got a lot more personality with that grace note in there. The other one, and this is something that came up with my student and comes up a lot with students, is fingering. This is pretty tough if I'm using, for instance, just my thumbs and pinkies. It's a lot of movement. It's hard to be accurate. So what do I do? With my left hand, I'm going to find a position where I can play both of these 2-note groups without moving my hand at all. Same thing with my right hand. I'm going to play it down an octave for camera reasons. So I really just don't have to move. With the grace note, I do have to move a little bit in the right hand. And when I'm playing like that as well, with that kind of fingering, I also am able to really maintain control of the articulation. If I have to move my whole hand, I'm probably going to have two separate sounding chords. If I just hang out in the middle, then I'm going to be able to have this kind of do-dit articulation. Let's do another one. I'm going to use just two different notes, but I'll repeat one so we get a kind of three-note phrase. Boop, boop, do-dit. Okay, so same thing. I'm going to transfer the voicings from what I practiced. And I'm going to play them with fingering that accommodates both different dyads. So here, I will show you what I'm playing here. And again, with this one, I like putting a little grace note in the bottom part of the right hand. Bill Evans does this a lot. He puts grace notes not on top, but in the middle to create an effect. So then, like, where do you go from there? All right, so this is, you're getting these two-note groups. I would practice basically trading with myself, improvising a short 2, 3, 4-note melody, and then harmonizing it so that you know that you can do it really fluidly. Let me do that again. That was sloppy. Right, so now I'm really getting some movement in my chords. It's really a far cry from just sitting there comping the same chord again and again. And of course, as you start working with more chords, like if we start thinking about a 2-5-1, if we're using these same really nice but relatively, simple in terms of jazz education voicings, we can create some nice melodies that go across this 2-5-1. So like I could imagine a next step in practicing where it's like do 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 do, something like this, do 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 do. And now we're harmonizing this more interesting melody. Which sounds really nice, especially once we get the bass involved. Let's do one more with this 2-5-1. Well, actually, first let me allow you to see what I'm playing. All right, so it's an inversion of the D minor. That's the original voicing for the D minor. Inversion of the G7, and this one sounds kind of weird to me without the bass. The bass puts it in really good perspective. And then on that end of 4, I would resolve to the C major. And certainly we might do this with altered tones as well. So I would rarely play that G7 without, for instance, like a flat 9. So I might go, it's already much more colorful adding that in. With this next one, let's use a flat 9 and a flat 13. So that's going to be D sharp or technically E flat. So I'm going to make another melody B, B, bo, do, bo, 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 bo. All right, I don't know about this. It also resolves in the end of 4, but let's try it. So, and maybe I'd resolve a little bit different here. I'm gonna add just a couple notes. So here I'm using the flat 9 and the flat 13. Look at what I'm playing. So again, I'm just still keeping these 4 notes per chord. I'm not really changing the notes other than to maybe put a couple alterations in the dominant chord, but I'm just inverting where those notes are taking place. And the melodies don't have to be fancy. Let me just reinforce that point that, it's not that you're making this really intriguing melody. 1 or 2 notes per chord is plenty. But let's do one more thing before I end this video. Let's put in some little neighbor tones. So instead of do, do, it's going to be do, 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 be. And let's put in be, do, do, do. Right. So these are neighbor tones, or we could argue that this first one here, the A sharp, is a passing tone, probably technically. And as we do this, we can use our ability to sidestep to add some color. So I'm going to play, on that A sharp, I'm aiming for this G7, so I'm going to use the notes a half step below. And then on the C major, just going a half step below that G. I could imagine doing something like that on the bottom line as well. Like we could do a really big side step. It could be dum. So I'm gonna be yada, or technically I'm aiming for that. And let's see. So they're leading into the chord using that half step. All right, I hope that showed you how you can take voicings that you already know, but make your output, your comping output, a little bit more melodic by inverting them or arpeggiating them. If none of this is making sense to you, you're going to find a lot of information about voicings and comping in Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 1. If this all seems like about your level, you might be ready for Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 2, where we get into a little bit more detail about how to create variety. Thanks everybody for watching. Since I made this video, in part inspired by my lesson with Josh, if you watch this far, say something about a Josh that you know and love in the comments. See y'all later.